everyone. We're going to start the program now. We may have some people come in late, so don't mind them. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to Middle Country Reads 2021 and 2020. This is our 14th annual read, and this year's selection is If the Creek Don't Rise. And it was also last year's selection. As you know, we were scheduled to host Leah Weiss in April of 2020, and then it got put on hold, and it got put on hold, and it got put on hold, and it's finally here, and I'm very, very happy. I'm very glad to welcome Leah Weiss tonight, and Leah will share her writing journey with us, and her inspiring story is surprising and wonderful, much like the books she has written. Her first book, If the Creek Don't Rise, the subject of our read, is filled with fear and pain, hardship and terror, but it's also filled with magic, love, joy, and discovery. Her second book, All the Little Hopes, is very different, but no less complex in the situations, motivations, and feelings of its character. So please welcome me, please join me. Whoops. Please join me, and I'm reading it. That's really the terrifying part. I'm not a good public speaker. And finally welcoming our 2021 Middle Country Reads author, Leah Weiss.
At last, right? My gosh, this is the third attempt, but third try is a charm. Can you hear me fine? Is this microphone doing well? All right, if you run into any problems, shoot the hand up. I've got a nice strong voice to begin with. So I've really got a big subject matter tonight because in the interim time, out came another book. How wonderful is that? And I just remember thinking, is that it was my first book a fluke, but obviously it isn't. So I'm going to spend the bulk of this first time speaking about If the Creek Don't Rise, and then answering some of your questions, and then talking a little bit about the new book, simply because it's a joy of my heart, but it's out and you've got me here, so why not hear both, right? So I want to take, hold on.
I'm going to swap this out, sorry.
This is Neil's staff, by the way, everyone. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about my writing journey because I am certainly a very, very late bloomer. Unlike the two lovely children that I met with this afternoon who are 12 and 13 and aspire to write, I never dreamed of writing until I was in my mid to late 50s. And it was suggested by a good friend of mine. We were doing a lot of spiritual communication online, and he commented about not only my writing skill, but that I had this lovely humorous voice that would pop in, and he said, "That's very hard to do. You've got it. You should do something with it." But I decided to first choose the subject matter of my mother's life, Lucy. My mother was one of 15 children born on a tobacco farm with no running water and no electricity. My mother was a very bright woman, and we were raised, of course, with running water and indoor plumbing. But I remember thinking that there were lots of stories about her life that I did not know about. And if you stop and think about your own families, how you sit around the table and you tell the same stories, but there's lots of missing pieces. So I decided to go to my mother after work and take my little tape recorder and put it between us and chat about very specific things that I could get a clearer picture, of how this worked. I have personal memories of staying on my grandmother's farm, and she had a one-bedroom, had a big feather bed. At least it was big in my mind. But I remember there were lots of us children that were my age, and I can remember at bedtime my grandmother pumping a hole and throwing one of us in the hole and pumping another hole in the mattress, the feather bed mattress, throwing us in it. And there was usually 2 or 3 of us sleeping in that feather bed. She'd get down and say her evening prayers, climb in. We knew not to get out of our hole. So we were sort of there, held prisoners for the night. I remember the outhouse. I remember an ice box on the back porch. I remember chicks arriving in little wooden and cardboard boxes. I had a lot of memories of being raised, and even though we had moved away, it was my summer playland that I went back. So here I am talking to my mother about some of her wonderful memories. And I did not know at the time that she was very ill and that in 5 months she would have died of lung cancer. And so we were sitting and talking one day, and she got this cute grin on her face and said, I didn't think anybody would be interested in this. And I'm just enchanted because I'm already thinking of writing some memoir stories, even if it was only going to stay in the family, you know, and that's often, I think, how writers begin. We start with the familiar, and then we may branch out and hopefully gain some footing there. So one of the many things that my mother had told me about, which ended up being the heart of this second book, was that there were German POWs that were working in tobacco market in 1944. And I remember the tape recorders taping this. I go home at night, I'm transcribing it, keeping all of my notes. Later I will write some of these short stories. And I had never heard of that. This was back in around 2004, 2005. So I put that little nugget back in my mind and had a lot of other writing adventures, writing again some memoirs, writing what I was talking to the young children this afternoon about, and that was to learn to write by studying prompts or getting a little writing prompt and having 1 month to write a little short story, paying my $5, sending it off, and having that story critiqued or chosen or not chosen, not chosen, not chosen, not chosen. But I could study the stories that did win. And I can remember that they were not like my writing. My writing was far too kind and too gentle, because when you cut your writing teeth on memoirs, you are very courteous to your family. You have to wait till they die before you can tell the truth. So that was not happening quite yet. But I can remember that wonderful story, and I remember the prompts, and I remember finally the extraordinarily good news when I got the notice that my short story had won. And it was a little national contest. I got a check for $150. It was published. And I was super excited about that, because out of a slew of maybe 100 or 150 different stories, my little story had risen to the top. And so that was an exciting thing. But what you may not know, and may I ask how many people have read If the Creek Don't Rise? What you may not know about this story, and hey Maya, it's good to see you, darling. What you may not know is that this book came from that short story, When. That it is the opening and the closing of the book. All I had to do was write 350 more pages. At the same time, I was very busy spending time talking or studying character development. It was not only an elusive thing for me, but getting that point of view and getting that character across was a real challenge for me. And so this book, in addition to being the opening and the closing of that short story contest, it is a fabulous character study of 10 different characters that was the community that was for or against our dear Sadie Blue. You know, we opened, we knew she was in a bad situation, and we wanted to know what was going to happen to her. It was quite an unusual book in that its format is different than probably a lot of those that you've read. But what I loved about my personal challenge of writing these characters so deeply was that you got to see inside them those pivotal moments that truly affected them and turned them or took them down the wrong path. And I also remember that at the same time that I was working on this, that I had the inspiration of the wonderful book, Olive Kitteridge. Olive Kitteridge, which won the Pulitzer Prize. Liz Strout happened to live next door to one of my best friends from high school. She's the lady that I first visited her on this leg of Dave's and my trip up in Gloucester. And she got Liz to sign the book, and she sent me it, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can learn so much from Olive Kitteridge, because she was very unlike my early memoirs that was nice and soft and protecting everyone in the family. Olive was really a despicable character that you could not look away from, and as a writer, I was truly, truly impacted by that, because I found that in all the little short story contests that I had entered, that it was the stories that did have more raw, a little bit rougher around the edges characters that we can relate to. I think that it's just such an interesting thing that is something we pivot to, that the super sweet stories are not necessarily the ones that have us talk about them late in the night or want to get back into reading them. So think about Olive when you think about, if you have read the book, you can probably go back and think about the grandmother, Gladys Hicks, is very much an Olive character. And if you remember in that particular chapter, it was the second chapter that opened Sadie Blue's story, that I chose to say a very rough, raw language to her. And your first introduction to Gladys Hicks is this: "What's your skinny ass doing in my yard?" Well, that's so Olive. And now, she may not have said it quite that crudely. She'd have gone and snuck in and gone into all your lingerie drawers and all your notes and everything like that. But that kind of character I found absolutely fascinating as a writer, because I knew also that this really rough grandmother character had some very, very sad moments in her life that had changed her. And that was one of the things that I thoroughly loved about the writing of this book, was that each of those characters, you got to know them, I got to know them in such deep ways that I could not quite forgive them, but I could understand them. And that was a joyful thing. I mean, that is why we read, is that we want to get to know and feel like that we are inhabiting these people. So I am very pleased with the 10 characters that tell Sadie Blue's story, but keep in mind again that it is the opening and closing is that short story, including that dramatic ending, which I won't spoil for those who have not read it yet. I do want to read a couple of small passages from this book, because one of the things that I was talking to Maya and Gigi this afternoon was the importance of cultivating your writing voice. And that writing voice, of course, is very individual depending on the character who is doing the talking. But I am very proud to be a Southern author, a Southern writer, who happened to set her first book in Appalachia in the western part of North Carolina. My second book is in eastern North Carolina, set during World War II. But I think that Southern writing has so much to do with the setting and the whole feel that's quite unique to a lot of genres that you might have. So I'm going to read a little bit of the opening of this If the Creek Don't Rise, which is an exact duplicate of the short story. And I'm going to read you the first paragraph. And this is what I want you to pay attention to. My background was music. Did I ever know that I was going to be a writer or 10 other things in my lifetime? None of us do, but that's what life does to you. But there's something about music and the musicality of beautiful writing that I thoroughly, thoroughly love. And so you will hear a lot of musicality in it, and it's very intentional. And I love that the person, the actress who did the audio portion, she did both books. The female in the first book, that Kate Forbes is her name, and Kate said, I need to speak to Leah through the agents. And she said, Leah, this book was the most delightful thing to read. And I said, well, it was meant to be read out loud. And she said, I can tell. And I think that's an important thing, in that it helps you, the reader, even if you're doing it inside your head, there is something that is satisfying the way it delivers that line. It just lays right exactly where it should lay. It is a lot of work to do it, and actually it's a whole lot of words thrown on the page, and most of them are thrown away. Of course, that's what you do. You're trying to find that cream that's rising to the top, and all the words that are confusing you or laboring it or weighing things down. So this is the opening of the little short story, but also the opening of If the Creek Don't Rise. And by the way, the prompt for that little thing was, I struggle to my feet. All right, so that was the only clue I was given. And out came this sentence that literally threw me back against my chair. I struggle to my feet, straighten my back, lift my chin, and he hits me again. And I remember falling back thinking, who in the heck is this person? She was standing right in front of me. Cinematically, Sadie Blue was already there. Now, is it a gift? Am I kind of wacko? I don't know all those things, who knows? But here's the rest. Here, let's finish the paragraph. This time I fall down and stay down while he counts. 8, 9, 10. He walks out the trailer door and slams it hard. The latch don't catch and the door pops open. I lay on the floor and watch Roy Tupkin cross the dirt yard and disappear into the woods. My world's gone sideways again. It's tragic. It is a hard thing. When I wrote that paragraph, I thought the only thing that is helping me is the fact that I think this girl has got a backbone that's going to rise above this. There is hope from the very, very beginning. And that's what I hope that you pick up when you're going through this, is that we're saying, how's she going to do this? You know, what's going to be the turning point? Who are going to be her helpmates? Who's going to turn their back on her? So, and it's an old story. I mean, I think all books, there's probably a handful of themes that we know that all good books come from, but it's then how we wrap things around it. So Sadie Blue is marvelous. Her grandmother is not so marvelous, but it is what it is. So I want to read a little bit of the only character in the book who comes from a real person. And my Uncle Willis was actually a Baptist minister, 50 years, and he could have been a stand-up comedian. He just would have us laughing so much. So I had to have Eli have some humor too. But one of the things, you heard Sadie's introduction, you know that this is a girl who is down and out, and you can feel some of the fact that she doesn't come from a polished world, she doesn't come from well-to-do. But we've got now a second character that I want to share with you, and his name is Eli Perkins. And here was my challenge. Eli is third generation. His granddaddy was a preacher, his daddy's a preacher, and he's a preacher. And Eli's pretty insecure about it because he's got giant shoes to fill. And as a writer, I'm thinking, what in the world can I do to really capture his amazing journey, but also for you to know instantly about this man. And I chose to have the daddy and the granddaddy take Eli to meet the devil. It's an exorcism. So here's the opening of Eli's chapter. Again, think of the rhythm, think of the movement through in a very cinematic way. Daddy took me to see the devil when I was 9 years old. Mama didn't want me to go, but Daddy said, if the boy wants to come, he comes. So I did. The sun came up in a blue sky morning and took some of the scare out of the day. Daddy carried his Bible clutched to his chest with one hand, and he held my hand with the other as we walked without talk through the woods to see the devil. Granddaddy crossed the creek and came up beside us and walked. He took my other hand in his, so I was held tight by muscle and bone to my two heroes. I didn't know who this serious granddaddy was who came this time without a joke or penny candy like he usually did. He wore his black fedora low and carried his Bible like a small shield, like Daddy did. Then the brother deacons came one by one from their places in the woods till they were 4 strong. They followed behind Daddy and Granddaddy and me, and their hard leather shoes walked on soft ground riddled with roots and rocks and fallen leaves. Above us, crows followed from tree to tree. They swooped low and cried soft. Daddy? Yes, son. Where are we going to go see the devil? He's taken up residence in the body of Pharaoh Moody, God bless his soul. I'd heard about Pharaoh Moody from grown-ups in scattered whispers with wringing hands and worry, and none of it was good. Folks had given up on it and wanted him gone. Not Daddy and Granddaddy. They don't give up on Pharaoh Moody. What you gonna do? I whispered. Help's on the way, and we're gonna cast out the devil and send him back to hell so Pharaoh Moody can get back to living. Daddy gave my hand a squeeze of confidence, and we turned quiet and walked on. That was a day I'll never forget. Now Eli is dreaming this and remembering this, but he is forever having to go up against giants that would go and fight the devil and face the devil. It was a wonderful thing when I was inspired to do that, and Eli came out in his pure heart with his sense of humor and his love of this community, this really, really rough community with all of its sins and all of its problems in it. He was a shining light. He, of course, was also the great companion to the teacher who comes to the mountaintop. I could almost say that every community needs a library. There isn't one up there, but we've got a teacher. So you need a preacher and you need a teacher in a community. And what Eli loved when the teacher came was that he had a marvelous sparring partner, someone that he could talk about spiritual issues, and they were very different. But later in the telling to her comes out that experience of actually seeing the exorcism and seeing the devil removed from Pharaoh Moody. So that's one of the characters. But then right after I get you through those 2 chapters comes Eli's sister. And Prudence Perkins is another Olive Kitteridge. If you know that, then you're going to know why she inspired that. But here is Prudence's opening one. And I love the opening line because you see her completely. Hell is being born into a family of preachers named Eli. She's right there. You know exactly what she looks like. And this is a powerful thing that I worked very, very hard to do. To not waste any time saying, well, in walked a woman with a tight bun at the back of her head and her shoes were taped together and she had on, we don't do that. You can see her because in that sentence, I gave you all of Prudence. She goes on to say, a person can't have a thought to herself without some rule taking the starch out of it. From the time I could walk, the path was marked, and only a fool would wander. And I want a fool. I settle for scraps if I wanted something, because brother got the choice, being the boy and all, being another Eli. So we know this butting of heads is happening there. She's truly a fascinating character. And then you find out that there are these pivotal moments in her life. One is having lost her mother at a young age. The loss of that mother was, of course, huge in that Prudence's ugly side could sort of run rampant, and that wasn't fun at all. She also had the tragedy of falling for a boy from a distance, and he didn't return the favor. And when he turned his favor to someone else, truly probably the ugliest of her came out. And that was the battle that she would do. But we could sort of understand that because Prudence was looking for her peace, her stand that she could do on. So those are 2 examples of the characters and the different voices. It was great pleasure. And I've often been asked, How did you choose who told the story and who was going to have a voice? And probably the easiest way when you're doing something this grandiose, which is to have 10 characters telling a single story and having that thread and still having a narrative arc, that I compare it to a fabulous buffet, your favorite buffet in town. You know, when you go, you know, you want to have something fresh and you want to maybe have something roasted and then something sweet and, you know, on and on. It's this variety that you're looking for. If everything was sweet, you'd be sick before the end of the line. If everything was fried, you'd be leaving the line. So it was choosing again this wonderful combination of characters that not only told the story well, but that added the right kind of spice to the story. So that became easy, although guess what? There were lots of characters that tried out and got cut. You know, you are busy throwing things on the page, and it is, you finally do know who has staying power. But people have asked me my writing process, and I say the beginning is abysmal because you're literally roaming around in the dark without even a flashlight, trying to find who's going to be telling this story. The middle part of it is better because it's really beginning to take shape. This house now has a roof on it, none of the fine tunes at all. But toward the end, the characters truly take over. I am not alone in this, and I've had many a writer friend say to me that that they intended the characters to go right and the characters went left and they had to follow them. You know, case in point, in this book, in Gladys Hicks, the grandmother's her thing, she would tell us a lot about her backstory in really nightmares and dreams that she had. But there was this particularly abusive nightmare that she had, a recurring dream based on truth. And when she awakened, frightened and worn out because her husband had beaten her again, she said, "That's the last time that Walter beat up on me." Now, I'm sitting there having typed that line. I don't have a clue what happened to Walter. I don't have a clue how she got rid of him or what she did. I did know this. She wasn't going to pick up a gun and shoot him. She wasn't going to stab him with a knife. We weren't going to do any of those things. And this isn't so much of a spoiler, but I think this is an important thing to tell you. That I knew that, in fact, Walter he drank a lot. And so he had passed out in the front yard. And a big storm was coming. And so Gladys went out in the rain and the wind whirling and this fever pitch of things, and she drug his body over to a plow and leaned it up against him. And she's standing inside her door, dripping wet on the floor, looking out that glass front door at this body. And she is hoping that the universe will help to answer her. Okay? So I'm excited. I'm writing this. We don't know what's going to happen. But, you know, they answer her prayer. It's an amazing scene. But, I forgot to say this right. She had taken also an old doghouse tin roof and drug it and put over him just to double shake, make sure all the lightning had all these parts to it. So the very next morning, you know, we know Walter's out there. She didn't go out there. She saw a big blast of lightning. You know, she's gone to bed. She climbed into bed, wet clothes and all, and she's just laying there hoping. So the next morning, down the road comes her next door neighbor, and Maris Jones is truly an angel in this book, and a necessary angel. She was the last character added to the book, but she is sweetness personified, and you need that. I mean, we all need that in our lives. And Maris saw that when that morning Gladys had gone out, she had drug the stabbed, whatever, with lightning, tin thing up the mountainside and left a trail as clear as day. That if anybody came by and took a look, that they were going to see where that tin roof was, and then probably point a finger at Gladys. And without any encouragement, knowledge, sharing of, or whatever, there Miss Maris picks up a branch and just rubs out the little thing there. So this was not known when I heard the line, "That's the last time Walter beat up on me." But I trusted that this character was going to take me down this road that felt right in Appalachia. This book is set in a place that doesn't have our justification, our laws, our rules. It's a quite cruel world. I'm not sure how much of the very same thing exists today. This one is set in 1970. It could have been set in 1950 or 1920, because it's a very, in that time of Appalachia, it doesn't change very fast. There's no fancy roads going up there, and they are used to surviving on their own, and that includes taking some things in their own hands. So that part was a lot of it was very satisfying to me. I chose to set it in Appalachia for a number of reasons. The very first writing course that I ever took was in 2014, and I have to think back, what was I, 67, 68 years old, something like that. First course I'd ever taken, and it was up in the mountains of Western North Carolina, and I was having one of my stories critiqued. It's one of the things we writers have to learn to do, is to critique other people's work and to have our writing critiqued. What's working, what's not working. So when they were doing, there's a wonderful story in here, a Billy Barnhill story. They were critiquing that one for class, and they had asked me, when is this set? And I said, well, it's in Appalachia. And they said, well, that's 13 states and 250,000 people. And, you know, it was funny. And they said, no, you got to narrow it down. When was it set? And I said, is that important? They said, absolutely, it's important. I'm busy learning. I am so green at this point. And so I chose to set it in 1970, Appalachia, which was the mountains I was looking at when I was writing, when I was there. For this reason, I'm a child of the 50s and 60s, and in the 1960s, Appalachia sort of came to the forefront. I don't know if you remember the cover of Life magazine, when they had the pictures of people that were on the side of the mountain, very thin, very gray-looking people. It was also the time then when Presidents Kennedy and Johnson sent the Peace Corps to the mountains in order to save the people. And what they found were strong Scotch-Irish that were very independent. So that was important for me to sort of know that. But it was also an interesting time because when my teacher, Kate Shaw, came to the mountain, she had been banished from her job. And the reason she had been banished from her job back then was because she had helped a girl get an abortion, and it was a firing offense. It was a no-no. So those could not take place in 1990 or 2000. 1970 had a lot of I guess the environment of what was happening then. So I learned a lot at that first class, so it shows you I was doing some things right, but I was doing some things wrong, and you just have to stay open and say, how do I make this better? How do I clear all of these problems up? So it took me the next year to write every day, a lot of hours of the day. And it was toward the time I was getting ready to put together a query letter and find an agent, feeling a little confident that I had a good book. And I had one of my critique group from years back. I met her out on the street, and she said, what are you working on? And I said, well, I'm finishing another book. My first one didn't sell. I said, I think this one may be better. And she said, do you mind if I read some? And her name is Marie Colligan, and Marie passed away from cancer the following year. But I said to Marie, Marie, I need you, if you read this, if I give this to you, I know it's good, but I don't know if it's good enough. So Marie took the first chapter, and I said to her, please ink bleed all over it. I really want you to be just nitpicky. And she did a marvelous job. When she came back, there would be things like this. Here's your perfect opening. Why did you stuff this little bland sentence above it? This should be what you open with. And I go, you're right, that is a strong opening, much stronger opening. And I had the same habit at the end of that chapter that I had tacked on again, just a little something, a little flirty thing. She said, no, stop us in our tracks. I was also doing a lot of bad habits. She said to me, I've only read one chapter, but you use the word just a lot. He was just walking down the street or just, you know, she said, just Google how many, or, you know, go up and find how many you have. And it was something like 150. And I said, whoa, that is a habit. She said, it's just a throwaway word. She said, try to get rid of all of them, but 2 or 3 if you insist on having 2 or 3. But most important, Marie said, you have a way of saying, and she referred to them as ing words. You have your characters walking and talking and singing and eating. She said, do you hear how tiring that is to your ear? So she said, just have them walk and talk and eat. So anyway, it was delightful. So I said to Marie, may I hire you for the rest of the book? And I do believe that our work over chapter by chapter, going through and seeing some bad habits that I had, things that I did not even know was annoying, was marvelous. So what was fabulous was that when I sent my book off to an agent, and we did decide to have a deal together, that she said to me, this is the strongest manuscript I've ever seen come from a debut novelist. And I said, well, I had help. We all have help. You know, you don't write by yourself. You don't, it takes you being able to pit it against, because your whole idea is to entertain a reading public. My idea isn't to entertain me or just my closest friends. It's to entertain a reading public. So if I've got other people who read it and say, you know, I got really confused by that, or didn't you already say that in another way? You know, do you have to say it twice? So, you know, it has you stop and think, and that part was really extraordinary. I am so grateful for that woman. We did many a conference and a literary festival and all like that when the book first came out, and I always gave Marie huge accolades because of the gift of her. And of course, I would have loved to have had her for the second book, but I did hear her in my head often. And by the way, this was so cute. The very end, the last chapter, she had me over for dinner, and so and we had been doing she was not tech savvy. She wasn't like Neil Staff back there, so she wasn't tech savvy. So I would have to send her the hard copy, and I would put in there envelope with all the postage on it, so that she would send me back what she worked on, and then I'd send her another chapter, and back it would come. So now we're at the last one, and we are at her table for lunch, and it was a lovely time, and we were finishing it up, and I gave her last little check, and it was money well spent. And so I said to Marie, you know, Marie, you've done exactly what I asked. You have cut every little thing apart. And I said, is it any good? Do you like it at all? And she said, well, it's going to win the Pulitzer Prize. So anyway, I said, that's good enough. That would be good enough. But it was, I didn't know. You know, I didn't know whether all of these pieces fitting together was going to be good enough. So when I finally signed with Sourcebooks Landmark, it was a delight to hear them say, you are the Southern voice we've been looking for. And that is, again, I'm thinking that it was, and I know I scared Maya to death today when I said to her, I think it was around 14 or 15 years I had been writing before I finally got my first book out. I'd published a lot of short stories. I had written the first novel that really wasn't good enough, and I am so glad that was not my foray into the publishing world. That took a lot of nerve for me to pull myself back together and say, I'm going to try again and do a better job. And I often think that there is no one, not even my dear husband, who is my best supporter, that there's no one who cares whether I write another word. What I mean is it has to be something inside yourself, a story, not only a story wanting to get out, but I think a type of a mindset that wants to learn the craft well. And that was my goal. I did not really focus initially on publishing. I knew that every time I pitted a story against others, that I was at least seeing, did it stand up? And it didn't for a long, long time, until finally it did. So that patience is probably my greatest pride, and it was probably a gift. In fact, if you had asked me all my virtues, I'm sure patience would not have been on it, but I obviously have it, so that's a good thing. I am going to talk a little bit about all the little hosts, but before we get away from the creek, and we've had so many of you read the book, I would adore being asked your questions about either some characters or how I thought about somebody or how did I come up with some ideas. I'm happy to answer your questions. I think that Lori's got the microphone because I'm hard of hearing and I just don't want to misunderstand you. So just raise your hand if you've got a If the Creek Don't Rise story.
A little bit about both. You talked a lot about your characters, and you talked about developing them and them having a voice. So this might be a very librarian question to ask you, but do you have, of course, when you're writing the sort of the Southern slang and the lingo, do you have a person that who's an author, or is it like an oral history?
That's a very good question, because as you see, I'm not an Appalachian person. I've been blessed to live in a house with indoor plumbing, and all those good things. So it was a lot of things in those mountains where I have set If the Creek Don't Rise, that little community of Baines Creek. They speak real good Appalachian there. And so I would often go to cafes, coffee shops, there was a hardware store, and you just go and sit and listen. Also, where I went to my writing school, my writing classes, it's a 2-week time I go every year since 2014. The kitchen staff are amazing. So you can go and just kind of hang with them and talk to them. So you're beginning to hear that. And we're also blessed writing in this day and age because we have YouTube and what I call Google Gods. My Google Gods means I can ask it anything. So for example, in this book, there is a point late in the book when we know that Sadie Blue is going to do something very dramatic, and it happens to fall on Halloween. And I want to know, and it's a full moon, and I want to know how many times in a lifetime is there a full moon on Halloween. Google God says every 19 years. So it's nice. Okay, I could be authentic. So I could say, I didn't know if it was going to be 50. So I could say, you'll never have this chance again, but it's not going to happen often, that's for sure. So it was listening to those things. It was also, I was blessed to have so many documentaries on television that was everything from ginseng hunting, which is big in this book, to moonshining, which is big in this book, to all kinds of mountain stories. And I would sit with my laptop and I'm listening and I'm typing, I'm jotting down things that are special and the way they say things. I knew too that in you reading this, I did not want the language or the written page to be off-putting. I did not want you to look as you would have at Huckleberry Finn in its early writing to see 4,000 apostrophes on every page as he dropped his consonant and had all these looking like ants on the page. So I had lots of challenges to create and to find a few words that would take you there. For example, you would hear in this book the word jasper, which is an outsider. You don't know right off the bat what a jasper is until it's referred to by the teacher, and finally you begin to understand a jasper is an outsider. That's a very good mountain term. The same way as a poke. You've heard of pig in a poke, but it's a paper bag, or a canvas bag. So I just chose a few things. I didn't heavy laden you with things that was just, again, too off-putting. I wanted the story to stay true, but to, again, take you there enough and to set you there. So it's a lot of things. And then, too, on YouTube, you can find lots of conversations with old-timers, lots of things that Foxfire has recorded, of people in the mountains. So it's listening to a lot of them and then picking and choosing what's going to be what you represent for your character. And believe me, it was a great refreshing moment when I had the teacher arrive in her education and her ability to think and philosophize, because it was a little undaunting sometime to stay there. and to keep the story really interesting. So it's that kind of thing. It's trying it and then it not working, or it's too much and taking it away, or then it's not quite enough. When I knew, and when you go to, your book is bought by a publisher and it goes through many editorial steps. And when I knew they were going to go to the line editor, which goes through and analyzes everything, I was a little nervous because this is a Chicago-based company. And I said to one of the editors I'd worked with, I said, I just really don't want them messing up all the work I did to have it look okay on the page or to be questioning it. And they said, if you put together a cheat sheet of all of the things you want us to leave alone, we will not touch them. And there was about 3 pages. So it was wonderful that they could see. And so and all they were doing then is making sure there was uniformity throughout. They would find something I skipped, oh, thank you so much. You know, we want to make sure that that's done. But that's a good question. But did you feel like you were sort of there when you were reading it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As a northerner, we don't really, well, we didn't know if I was accurate or not, but when I was reading the story, I could hear that. And and, you know, you're right there. It's challenging to not only write a good story, but then have to worry about.
I'm doing fine, Lori. She's got a great voice for that. There, you're like me. Yeah. Has anybody listened to the audio? Oh gosh, it's so good. You need to do that. When I got the word that they had sold the audio rights for the first book, the second one is also out. I thought, oh my gosh, who bought that? And they said, well, Andy Paris in New York City. I said, oh my God, New York City? What about, this is Southern folks. We need to have Southern here. And so I got in, they gave me the contact for Andy, and I said, who did you choose? And he said, a man and a woman. And Tom Streckback had just done Cormac McCarthy's latest book. So he's much more, not so much Eastern as he is Southwestern in his Southern. But Kate Forbes is the one I mentioned to you that called and said that it is just such an easy book to read, that it just is, she's not struggling to have enough breath to finish out a sentence or something. And so when the second book came out, we immediately, my agent and I, began campaigning for Kate again. So I did my first NPR interview with Kate, so I think a few of you have heard that. And it was wonderful because she literally morphs into these characters. She's a beautiful woman, maybe in her early 40s. And I had no idea that she could sound and stand there as 17-year-old Sadie Blue and then morph into Bertie Rokas, who's 150 or whatever she is. She's an old mountain woman. And she just could move, and she said it's the set of the jaw. So I'm busy watching this in just awe because I'm not doing that, but she literally did morph into the character. So it's an exciting thing. When Dave and I listened to them, it was like it was brand new. It was another thing. And you hear good narrators and then not so good narrators. So we're real blessed to have a wonderful readers for the books. Good question there. Any other? Yes, ma'am.
Are you thinking of doing a sequel on Creek? Because you kind of left us.
I am asked that a lot, and I did start a sequel simply because I was so in love with these people. And my agent said, we didn't sell a 2-book deal. She said, now if your book sells 1 million copies, we can talk a sequel. And it has sold about 110, 120,000, so it's doing very well. It's in its 12th printing as of this month. So it's still doing very, very well. That'll lead me to my second one, but I will answer your question by saying that there is a third book roaming around in this blonde head here. And that third book is something that will probably cheat and do this, but it's going to take a few characters from each of the books, so at least you will know what happened to them. I am not sure yet if they're going to be a primary or secondary character, but it's going to be back in the mountains of western North Carolina. It's going to be a little later in it, and it involves something very different. But I'm getting super excited. I haven't really started putting things down on paper yet, and I think because I'm trying to think of the beginning, and really that's not how you want to write a book. You simply just start and you establish a scene. And when you've got that scene in your head, it will build from that, and then you'll decide, oh, does that scene belong at the beginning, middle, or end? So that's not so important, but I've got some really fun things playing around, and so that's we'll see. This one took me, once I really knew my format, it was a solid year, but then I worked with my agent and a publisher, and then you still have to get the buzz going, so it's a good 3 to 4 years before the book reaches you. I might have done my major work years earlier, but then the publisher is busy reading, sending it out, and filling in the holes, you know, saying, this isn't clear, could you add more here? Or could you say this differently? They don't do any writing on your manuscript, but they will do that. So then I had the question early on, you all surprised me, meaning the reading public surprised me at one of the first things saying, so what are you working on next? And I went, I just birthed this baby. And it took me years to carry this baby and birth. Let me enjoy this baby. So it was a while, mostly because being a new writer, I was so in love with these characters and so enchanted by their relationships that it was very hard for me to go fall in love with another family, but I did. Because I went back to my mother's little nugget of the German POWs, and I thought it was going to be the heart of my book, but what it ended up being was sort of woven into it, because this is what happened. Began researching and found out that my little hometown of Williamston, North Carolina had a POW camp, and there were 18 camps across North Carolina. There were 700 camps in America. There were 700,000 Germans, POWs, roaming America, working in timber, cotton, peanut, and tobacco. So my little hometown had 355. They actually had some Italians that were brought first, but they refused to work, so they were taken back to more of a concentration camp. But came to my little hometown, these 355 Germans, and they were artists, and they were musicians, and they were carpenters, and they were farmers. They were not dyed-in-the-wool Nazis, and they were so grateful to be out of the war. So I'm looking for meaty stuff to write a book about, and the German POWs were not that. If anything, I heard tender stories about them. Dave and I went 5, 6, 7 times down there. We even had the privilege of meeting 6 people in their 90s who remember the German POWs on their family farms. So they would say, well, my daddy lent them the boat to go fishing on Sunday. They couldn't even go anywhere. They're just going to go out fishing on the Roanoke. And I would go, really? And then another woman said, and my mom and dad loved to go to the camp on Sunday after church to eat at their mess hall because they were such great cooks. There was no meat on those bones that was ugly. It was all sweet. So I chose instead with this one to have 2 girls tell a story that was set in 3 years of World War II, 1943, 44, and 45. And one of them is named Lucy, after my mama, and the other one is named Eli Burt, after her mama. And it opens with Burt. We find out what a tomboy she is, but I'm going to give you a little taste of Lucy and Burt's life here. And what I found out, I mean, I say what I found out, you're busy writing these wonderful characters and you're finding out, oh my gosh, a man's gone missing and these girls are so inquisitive and they're getting into trouble, and another man goes missing, and all of a sudden we've got ourselves a serious mystery. And then I thought, well, you know what? I think that Lucy's probably going to be crazy in love with Nancy Drew, who was 13 years old in 1943. I remember when I was Maya's age, in fact even a little younger, I was introduced to Nancy Drew. I inhaled her books. I probably almost did a book a day. And my mama said she'd have to come over and yell in my ear because I was in another place. I was in a place of great power and great respect and great mind, all these wonderful deductive thinking going on. So I thought, well, my little Lucy and Burt's going to have a little taste of that too. So you'll all fall in love with that part of it. Because Nancy Drew was 13 at the same time these girls were 13. So that's good. But I'm going to read the prologue, and then I'm going to read the opening of Burt's voice, because I've taken in this book, instead of 10 voices, you have 2. You have Lucy, Burt, Lucy, Burt, Lucy, Burt. Kind of easy, you catch on. And it goes what's wonderful is that you begin to see how Burt, who comes from such hardscrabble mountains in the West and such really a dismal family life, but is absorbed into this amazing family, the Brown family. And the Brown family not only were great storytellers, they literally told stories to the community. They really became like, they had an enviable library, so it was really, really, really wonderful. So let me get myself a sip of water. Now you won't be able to see this, but I'm going to tell you that in your book, there's a little illustration at the very top, and it's something that looks like a rabbit with antlers and wings. When I was researching for this book, and the grandmother is from Germany, I wanted to have a good piece of Germany in this story. The grandmother was from the mountains in the Black Forest, and there's the Brothers Grimm, and there's all these things. And when I'm doing all this research, this little thing called a Wolpertinger popped up, kept popping up on my monitor, and of course I had to click on it and see what it was. And what was fascinating was that the Brothers Grimm and the Black Forest was really a big moneymaker for Germany. In other words, it was such a curiosity, all of these fables and stories coming out of it. So these taxidermists would take these animal parts and put them together in bizarre ways, call them Wolpertingers, and guess what? You could go on a hunt for a Wolpertinger for a price. You know, so they would have you come and they'd take you through their woods. And you could see one stuff, so you knew they lived. Well, I knew I had to have a Wolpertinger in my book. I mean, this has just got to be the best thing. That again was the Google gods giving that gift to me, because I had never heard of anything like that. So here's Lucy's prologue. She's a very precocious, wonderful, bright girl who thinks she knows a lot more than she does. We are an innocent lot, my two brothers, 4 sisters, and me, born on as ordinary a land as God ever made. Our tobacco farm in Riverton, North Carolina is far from Oma's soaring mountains in the Black Forest of Germany, where tall trees dim the light of day, and the tales of the Brothers Grimm grow out of the loamy soil, where even a polished apple holds peril. Her stories raise the hairs on the backs of our necks, and fear prickles and chills our skin. Telling tales is Oma's best talent. After, when prayers are said and we're tucked in our feather bed and the house turns still as stone, I lie between Cora and Lydia, and we remember and clutch hands until our grips soften, safe in this place, for our grandmother's stories live far across the sea, but they are real because of the Wolpertinger. Oma's grandfather came upon the creature in 1881 while hunting, and he preserved it for all time. It is 17¼ inches long and is equal part rabbit, roebuck antlers, and falcon wings. Because Wolpertingers thrive only in crisp air filtered through evergreens and washed clean in clouds, we'll never see Wolpertingers in Mercer County. Our humid air is too heavy to conduct magic. The creature came to America in a wooden box with a hinged door. And for the years Oma lives with us, it resides on top of her Bavarian armoire. We take turns cleaning it with a feather duster, but we never touch its eyes, for they are hazy and off-kilter. Of her 7 grandchildren, I'm Oma's favorite. In private, she tells me so. It's because I am curious and have a deductive mind. I collect obscure words like misnomer for contradiction and knave for someone dishonest. My favorite word is enigma, for without mystery to challenge a curious mind, it starves. My brother Grady calls me high and mighty for using $10 words in our 10-cent town. Out loud, I call him rude, but inside my head, I know he's a chuff. Mama says I can be insensitive. She says language is meant to communicate, not separate. So I mostly spend $10 words inside my head. Oma never returns to Germany. She dies in Riverton on the 20th of May, and her granite tombstone is etched with a mountain sketch we've only seen on the pages of a travel book in our library. At her passing, our hope for thrilling danger passes with her. We fear nothing will happen here. Here, where a lazy river rolls by, outsiders are rare, and farming rules our days. We think we are safe here, where nothing happens until something comes that undoes us all. So that's, you hear Lucy's voice, and obviously she is quite precocious. I'm going to give you a taste of Burt. At this point, they haven't met. So you've had the first chapter opened with an interesting tidbit about World War II history that I had not heard. When Dave and I met with the 6 people who remembered the POWs on their family farm, one of the ladies, Rita Gardner, said, my daddy was a beekeeper. He had 100 hives. And she said, one day a government man came to our door and wanted to buy all our beeswax. And she said, we were told that the government used 1 million pounds of beeswax a year. And it was used to waterproof the tents primarily. Also something in the ammunition. Never had heard that. So when my agent heard that, she said, put it to the front of the book. So you have that in the opening paragraph or opening chapter as Lucy and her family are dealing with something that could potentially be quite life-altering. But chapter 2 is Burt. And she comes, as I said, from a very hard-scrapple life. So this is her opening line. So you'll hear very different voices. It's wash day on the last Wednesday in May. Sheets is heavy on the line next to overalls and flannel shirts flapping in a breeze coming down from the highlands heading for Asheville. There was this itty-bitty tear in Ma's old sheet, and it's what I'm in need of. A strip of cloth, 2 lengths of a baby coffin. So being the thoughtless girl I am, I take the edge of that tear, rip it up one way, then cross the other till I get what I want. Then I go to my room, I share with my older sister Ruth, and bolt the door. 'Cause it's in plain sight, Ma sees that tore out sheet and lets out a scream to her savior and her wayward daughter, getting us a tad mixed up. Sweet Jesus, what in tarnation got into you, Burt Tucker? She shouts to the heavens. I don't come out of my room, don't answer in respect neither. I keep winding that stole muslin around my naked chest to cover my swole breasts. I'm tamping down my bosom 'cause it changes things and I ain't ready for change. The rusty hinges on that screen door scratch open and slap shut. Ma's heavy feet flap across the sticky linoleum up to my door where her words slide through the cracks. I know you done it. Can't be nobody but you. Ruined the cloth you sleep on like we rich as kings and can buy what we please. You gonna be the death of me. Ma stops her talking, breathes like a mule run hard, and moans low from the baby growing heavy in her belly. Her voice turns to mush when she says, what's got into you, Burt? And I yell back, my name is Burt, plain Burt. Then I jump when Ma hits the outside of that door with the flat of her hand and says, you a thoughtless girl. I pray the good Lord will punish your selfish ways. May he break your willful spirit. I still don't open the door. I get up on tiptoes to look at the cracked mirror on the wall to see a chest flat as a boy. The muslin makes breathing hard. I don't worry about the washing on the line. Don't worry about shelling peas or scrubbing a sticky floor. I let Ruth do the worry stuff since she's 15 to my 13. I pull on a shirt and overalls, climb out the open window, and drop to the ground, quiet as a cat. So that's your introduction to Burt. Obviously, very, very different life. And there is just a great heart to this book. It is so much of my memories of my mother, my memories of my grandmother, and yet I was not born until 1947, so I wasn't exactly there. But I don't think that part of the world changes very much. I mean, 10 years, 20 years, we look pretty much the same. So that's a little bit about that book, but I'm again here to answer either questions about the first book or the publishing trip in general, or anything like that. My husband's a great cook. I'll share some recipes. Any thoughts or questions? You don't have to be shy. Yes?
I am shy, but I'll try to ask my question. The title of the book, did that come to you right away?
Lori, I do need the microphone for that. And it's not you, sweetheart. It's I have hearing aids.
I'm sorry.
They're partially good.
I'm I'm just shy, so I guess I was talking a little loud.
I'm sorry, okay. You're among friends. We're all of your best friends here, so.
So the title of the book, did that come to you right away? Did that take time? Because the title of the book actually has a great meaning to it.
Yes, it really did.
Follows throughout the whole book.
Yeah. The answer is no. I had nothing to do with the covers or the titles, and obviously that's not my forte. The working title I think I used for this book, If the Creek Don't Rise, was probably Baines Creek, which was just a little community, the main thing there. You just call it a working title, and it just means that at least we know what we're calling it that way. I think I even tried Bones of Baines Creek, and they said, no, we don't like the word bones in it. It's not that kind of a mystery. So it was interesting because initially, and in your contract when you sign it, it clearly gives the publisher free rein over the title. And it is a scary thing. You know, even though I knew mine wasn't the best, it's a scary thing. So I got a title that came to me, and there is an ending in the first chapter that is so clever. I wanted to say it right, correct thing there. And it's, the sentence is, when that day comes, Boyd Tupkin's going to be sorry he ever messed with me or Loretta Lynn. So it was having to do with listening to Loretta Lynn on her transistor radio, which I have that green little transistor radio in my basement. So they were talking something about Loretta Lynn, and I said, oh my gosh, I think Loretta Lynn, that's the only time she's mentioned, or maybe one other time when we're talking about, and I actually had, I think, Country Stars on Parade. I'd gotten something that my character, Sadie Blue, would have seen. So, but I said, no, I'm not going to touch Loretta Lynn. I mean, that's bigger than Nancy Drew probably, or close to. So I talked to my agent and I said, I'm a little worried about this naming my book thing. I'm not sure what's going to happen. So she said, well, you don't have a whole lot of word. If you hate it, we could probably go to bat. But if you just don't like it, or just think it's okay, we probably don't have too much of a leg to stand on. So comes the day that they say the title, and I go, oh my God, I'm just having a little tizzy fit there, just worried about it. And what they did was this, they were so clever. They didn't tell me the title when I opened it, because I'm busy kind of, wanting to look at the email and not sure if I'm going to like it. They laid out why they wanted this title. And they said that the community of Baines Creek was the primary character. It is all these characters in Baines Creek. And of course, I think you all, we're so far north here. Does everybody know the expression, if the good Lord willing and the creek don't rise? Okay, some of you do, some of you don't. It's a very common Southern one, which, by the way, that saying did not come from what it sounds like. It came from actually a capital C for Creek Indians. It was spoken in 1750 by a military man who was talking about the Creek Indians, and then it makes perfect sense if the good Lord willing and the capital C Creek don't rise. It is no longer grammatically incorrect. But anyway, I had to be educated on that. So I said, nope, didn't know about that. So they had chosen the title, And the Creek Don't Rise, because the saying is, if the good Lord willing and the creek don't rise. And I thought, and the creek don't rise. I said, there's an implied, the little preposition's implied there. So we did change it to if the creek don't rise. And so it usually means, of course, if there's going to be a calamity, a natural calamity that's going to happen, that's going to prevent you from doing something. So there was also a wonderful question today by Maya and Gigi about the book covers. And I don't have anything to do with them. But this one was chosen, a lovely woman, actually the photographer is in Michigan. She reached out to me, and when she saw this cover, knowing this was her child, not the truck. But they were looking at this saying, the innocence and purity of this child against a dark world was really what it was saying, because this isn't Sadie Blue's 17. And so your brain starts kind of arguing, being, very exact. And it becomes more of a, again, a feeling, an emotion that these are emoting. So I didn't have anything to do with If the Creek Don't Rise, but I have loved it, and we refer to it just as The Creek. You know, I'll just say, well, have you read The Creek? And we'll say of this one, have you read The Hopes? So they chose the exact same syllables, which I thought was clever for the second book. This is a very hope-filled book with the two girls coming of age in a time when war is taking place around them, where there is lots of things that really challenge them. So it is, I think it's a very sweet, poignant story. I was challenged because so many of you read this. Did you like the ending of this book here? Oh yeah. It's really got a great ending that had you, at least shocked you, didn't it? I mean, you had to go, whoa, I didn't see that coming. And so I had to do, I think this second book is somewhat close. I mean, I was real tickled with the ending here because I didn't want anybody to say, well, she sure let us down this time. So hopefully that didn't happen there. So that's a great question, about the title and the book covers. But do you have another question over here, or anybody? Maya, so glad to see you, my dear.
So I just wanted to ask, I know, so from what I heard, I've never read the books, but from what I heard, both the books have like the same genre, like a realistic fiction type.
Yes.
Like the second book is a little more like, I guess, fantasy, because in the beginning
It does have fantasy in that. Good.
I was wondering why you chose the same genre. Is that just what you enjoyed reading? Is that what you enjoyed writing? Or is that just, I don't know, is there any other reason, or just that's what the characters...
I'm already ready to sign Maya's first book when she's got that out there. I so love my time with her this afternoon. Maya, that's a great question. And when I started writing, remember I started writing my mother's memoirs, which was Southern. I mean, there she was in the South on a tobacco farm. So, and that is where I was raised, and they do say, write what you know. But it was also a real affinity for Southern. I mean, I guess we could go back many years to To Kill a Mockingbird and the powerful message and the sense again of place that was there. And then too, if you remember with this one, it was after many short stories I had entered, it was the winning short story. I had this little 3 pages that was quite Southern, set in Appalachia. It was almost an accidental thing because some of my other stories were not set in Appalachia. But when this one began to be developed, I found I truly loved that Southern voice. And if you go to my website, leahweiss.com, I had spent a lot of time with a branding consultant at the end of the pandemic, simply because she had said to me, you say you're a Southern author, but you don't have much presence on whether it be on Facebook or any of that Southern voice. So we worked very hard to understand what that Southern voice was. This, as well outside in there, that's one of the pictures that's on my website that we approve for sharing. But it is, I think, if I can say that Southern writing is hot now, I mean, it's a thing that is, it probably started when this came out with Hillbilly Elegy, which was a great thing. Then I've had the pleasure of meeting some Southern writers. Bryn McLean's One Good Mama Bone is one of my favorite books. A Great Old Bird by J.C. Sasser won the Southern Book Prize, which is astonishing. And then there's a wonderful new author. She's only in her 20s. She wrote Every Bone a Prayer. So if you don't have Every Bone a Prayer, you need to get that because she's got a new book coming out that's waiting for me to blurb when I get home. So excited because she truly writes a different language that is still so very Southern. And that's what you're going to be looking for, whatever genre you choose, science fiction, fantasy. It's what can be my unique voice that has people say, well, Leah's writing is extraordinarily lyrical. I think I could pick it out. That third book will sound like these first 2 books in that way. But you're right, I snuck a lot more fantasy in this second book, and I love that. There is a fabulous character in this book called Trula Freed. And Miss Trula Freed appeared to me in my imaginings of this book because, remember, Lucy's favorite word is mystery and enigma. So Trula Freed is probably the greatest enigma because she wears these long, colorful kaftans and these big turbans, and she has great respect in this community, but she knows things that nobody could know. And I believe, I guess I say I don't disbelieve these worlds of possibility. So for the girls, she was a charming character to introduce that was both a helpmate but also just confused them in the best way. So, you don't want to have the road too straight and too narrow for them. But I think I know now that my Southern voice, my Southern writing voice, and my appreciation of the Southern genre is probably my favorite, but I read everything. And at your young age, that's the greatest gift you can do, is to read everything. And what you're looking for in reading everything is that when you find something that makes your heart gallop, the question is, how did they do that? When you find yourself tearing up and you go, oh my God, you're gasping. How did they do that? These are words on a piece of paper. They're not literally a movie that's having you drown in all the senses. If they make you giggle, how did they do that? So I can remember reading a book many, many years ago called Folly, F-O-L-L-Y. I think there's another book that came about of it, and it had to do with this woman who had gone up to the Northwest, and she lived on a deserted island, and she was rebuilding her uncle's fallen home, but using the old way. She was a world-class carpenter/wood artist. She's been weeks and weeks on this island by herself. She has to go up the mountainside to get her water and pick it up to take it down to her camp. And she's up there one day, and I mean, you're just la 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 in your mind when you're reading this book, and she sees a footprint beside a footprint is right beside that stream, and it is not hers. I mean, it's just, and she starts running down that mountainside, and I am gasping for air. I'm reading it. I'm gasping for air. That was the thing. I said, how did she do that? It was these little short sentences, dash, 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 dash. So I do that sometimes when I'm writing, because you're really trying to deliver a lot more than a story. You're trying to immerse your reader into an entire experience. And I look forward to your journey. It's going to be a lot of fun for you. Any other great questions? And by the way, Miss Maya had asked, she said, well, is there any way I can buy a book? Well, I'm going to gift you with my book tonight, dear Maya. I'm so happy that you're here. This is great. So that's going to be a lot of fun. All right, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Well, my question was kind of answered already.
And again, would you mind just one more time?
Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
You almost answered my question. I was saying to myself, watching you and listening to the stories, that the cover of this book is so evocative. The way the two girls are there, but their heads are cut off, and it's got such an atmospheric mood to it. And then you answered that already, saying that you didn't really have an input, but I wanted to say it's a really intriguing cover. And
well, this story, this cover is even bigger than we know. I heard from the photographer that Sourcebook bought it from, and by the way, she sent me her original, meaning it just, I'm sure that the graphic artists are busy looking through a lot of things, and hers was a full picture. But this is the sweet story that this photographer told me, that her mother helped put this shoot together, that they went to secondhand stores and bought the cotton dresses, that they went scouring the countryside and found the old house, and then they put their daughters, the mother's granddaughters up there and took this picture, and it was a full face, with all the things there. And then she said my mother developed Alzheimer's. So she said, when I look at this last shoot, it is extraordinarily poignant to me, because my mother was creating a setting that was so otherworldly. I mean, it was today, but it's not. Yeah. you know, it was just so wonderful. So she happens to live, I already checked, 14 hours from me, and we're not heading that way anytime soon, but I would love to meet her and thank her for it. I did meet this artist, and her daughter's much older, graduated from high school, but she was actually, her daughter was tired that day of the shoot and just plopped down on the curb, and that was the picture of fatigue and a little frustration, because Mom, I'm over it, you know, tired. So, but that I was, and I've had people say, well, why did they cut their heads off? And I think it's because it's back to, again, the whole mood that the cover is trying the setting, not to have you have an exact picture, you know, of the girls. So, and again, I had nothing to do with that. It is an art form. If ever you're curious, to Google or go to YouTube how they pick covers or how they design covers, because as you know, sometimes they're extraordinarily simple and sometimes very complex. It is a very big message that they're giving you and sending that. So it's, I think there have been TED Talks about it, which are a lot of fun to watch. So thank you for that compliment on that. Like, glad you like that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are having ourselves a fabulous time tonight. I can't think of too much that I haven't told you, but I do want to sort of close with something you may not know if you've not been following me on Facebook or Instagram or on my website. But for the Creek, 4 years ago, my husband said, I'd really like for us to take a trip around America. And so we got in our car, and we were only gone 3 weeks, but we went a lot of places, and Source Books helped us put together wonderful gift bags that had the advanced reader's copy and a moon pie and some stuff in that method. It was a lot of little southern things in there. So we had a back filled with these, and we would stop at bookstores, and they would have called ahead and said, Leah's coming by and just wants a quick photo op and to drop off an advanced reader's copy. So this was many months before the book actually hit the bookstores. So we did that for 3 weeks, and we had a ball, and we befriended a lot of wonderful bookstores. So roll it ahead 4 years later, and the pandemic has changed our lives, and Dave and I had our 2 shots, and the world was beginning to open a little bit, and he said, let's do another cross-country trip for Hopes. And by the way, I didn't think I said this before, but we've even had our booster shot and our flu shot. We're bulletproof up here. I'm not going to sneeze on you, but I'm good. So we spent 5 weeks on the road and went, my darling husband drove 8,800 miles. We visited 45 bookstores. We went to 7 national parks. And what we did was to kind of go hard, and then we take a break and go, spend 2 or 3 days there, and go hard and then spend a few breaks. We got to see friends along the way who'd probably been vaccinated, and visit some great places and meet new bookstores. I tell you, one of my favorites, I've got a couple of favorites. One was out in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I'd been told by my publisher to go to the Poison Pen. If any of you are big murder mystery writers, it's probably the national big murder mystery bookstore that has more first edition signed copies, and they have an amazing collection of interviews. So if you just look up Poison Pen, go to their archives. If you want to read some, I'm sure David Baldacci's on there too, and you've already seen him, but there would be just wonderful ones there. So I walk in with my mask on, and I've been told to ask for John Charles, this lovely, quiet man, and my hard of hearing, and we're masked and all this stuff. So it was so funny. I'm sitting there trying to kind of babble with him, and Dave leaned